Let me be straight with you. This is a radio commercial for 3 Small Business Insurance. The policy has no fine print. It's clear what's covered. So while you can't see the following scene, just know that this pet store is protected by 3.
Joe, did you leave the snake tank open?
Look, I don't want to point fingers, but yes.
It's biting me! Sorry, sir. I'm calling my lawyer.
They're going to need some help with this mess. Luckily, they have 3. No fine print, just exceptional coverage. 3 is a product of Berkshire Hathaway Direct Insurance Company. 3. No nonsense, just common sense.
Millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people.
You cannot shake hands with a clenched fist.
Produced by a nuclear exchange would be carried by wind and water and soil and seed to the far corners of
the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We're not saying that planet Earth is coming to an end. We're saying that planet Earth is about to be refurbished, spaded under, and have another chance to serve as a garden for another civilization.
Most of the people in here are just your reflections. They're your mistakes.
1776 will commence again if you try to take our firearms.
1 million of the planet's 8 million species are threatened.
You are what you repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence ought to be a habit, not an act.
Your lives and the credibility of the United Nations is at stake.
Epstein didn't kill himself.
The reason this is such an interesting time is not only because we're on the threshold of the end of this civilization.
They're trying to take you out with bullshit.
The experience of the past 2 years has proven beyond doubt that no nation can appease the Nazis.
To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish.
In the language of the U.S. Department of Defense, these are unidentified aerial phenomena.
Roswell's a very interesting place with a lot of people that would like to know what's going on.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone.
This is the Garden of...
Welcome everyone to Garden of Doom. This is your host, Jeff. I am tilling the soil and I'm laying the seeds solo this week in the garden because Shah is at a very special event, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that shortly. But this is either episode 16 or 17. I'm not exactly sure. Why, you ask? I'm going to tie that bow as well. So here's the deal. Shah is hosting an event this weekend, right now as we speak. So we're going to plug his stuff. Go to his Twitter, Nuclear Heat Graphics, or his Facebook, Nuclear Heat Graphics, or Clothesline Tees, and look for the links for this weekend, because frankly, I forgot the name of the event. But he's got a significant investment involved, and he's done significant amounts of art that are available for personal signatures by Dem Boys. Yes, the Briscoe brothers, the multiple-time Ring of Honor Tag Team Champions. And I'm pretty sure that at least Jay Briscoe has had the Ring of Honor World Championship once or twice. And Mark, I think, has had some, might have held that championship once as well. Also, the current NWA Women's Champion, Serena Deeb, who's an AEW star as well, is going to be there. And this is the headliner for me. No offense to the others, but I grew up with this man. He's the guy who said, I don't mean to toot my own horn, but toot toot. The Enforcer, member of the Four Horsemen, Arn Anderson, is there. You may currently know him as the coach for Cody Rhodes on AEW television, but he was one of the original members of the Four Horsemen and a legend in wrestling. So check him out. The auction is going on probably right now, so get yourself some live art. So that's one of the reasons why he's not here now, because he's doing that. He's been working on the art and the organization all week long, but he also had other responsibilities aside from having domestic relationships, about 42,000 pets. He's like Noah's Ark over there. He also had a Shane Douglas print that was done for a Shane Douglas signing recently, and he does art for a number of podcasts and other sources. He had to do Survivor Series art for I know at least one podcast, The Don Tony Show. So he had a lot of stuff going on. So that brings me back to why I'm not sure if this is episode 16 or 17. Because here's a little secret. Until now, I had no idea how to upload and edit a podcast. I could record it. I mean, I've had the software for a few weeks, but it was all on Shah, and that was sort of unfair to him, but, you know, he knew it coming in, but he also got really, really busy because I'm his good luck charm. Despite this being Garden of Doom, I am good luck for a lot of people. Usually not myself, but for other people. Well, I was going to say I learned how to do it. That's a lie also. The gorgeous and beautiful La Sicaria Viviana de la Jungla, she's learned how to do it, and she is the executive producer. So we're going to give her a plug because aside from being a computer genius, she's also a Feng Shui consultant. So if you're interested in Feng Shui, go to Viviana Feng Shui. Just check her out on Facebook, and she'll do consultations, individual stuff. This is a business, so, you know, it's for money. So again, why don't I know what episode number it is? Because Shah and I recorded an episode a few days after the election. We wanted to let things cool down. We wanted to let things marinate. We wanted to get our thoughts together. We have sort of stayed away from politics when we could, though it's been fairly unavoidable since we started the show. I mean, we basically started the show around the same time the George Floyd incident occurred, so it's been unavoidable. Shah is much less shy than I am about sharing his politics on the air because he has a much longer podcast relationship with the audience. He's been doing podcasts for years. This is my first full-time podcast, or not full-time, but personal podcast. I do have another one called Hammerlock Hangover, which is about wrestling, and I had appeared as a guest on a few other shows as well. The Wrestling Soup was kind enough to have me on a Frank and Gus episode. The Drew Yari Show was kind enough to have me on Drew Yari himself. So me and him did a show together, which was a lot of fun. And I've been on Wrestling Soup again with a Mash with Mish, actually pretty recently. In any event, so the point being is that Shah has not had an opportunity to drop the election episode, but it is very possible that I'm not as technically savvy, or La Sicaria isn't as technically savvy as I think. So it's possible that Shah has either dropped the episode before I drop this one, or will need his help to drop this one, and then there'll be two sort of back-to-back. So that's why I don't know whether it's episode 16 or 17. Wow, that was a long story, but I hope it was somewhat interesting to you and gave you a little insight into the two of us. The good news is that if we have successfully learned how to do the technical stuff on this side of the equation, these shows will come out much more consistently, hopefully once a week. And if need be, I'll do solo shows. And Shah, of course, can always do solo shows. But I would like to have a firm drop date or semi-firm drop date so that the audience can sort of count on when the show is going to come. I'm not sure if that's really important or not in podcast land, but I'm sort of wired for TV from the 70s and 80s and whatnot. So anyway, that's what's going on with that. Show Shah some support. Look up his stuff. Buy some art. Tell your friends. The election episode, you're going to hear it. I hope you're going to like it. It was pretty thoughtful. So look forward to that coming. Even though it is about 2 weeks ago, something in that time frame, not a lot has changed to make it outdated. I think it's still just as relevant now as it was then, based on sort of the lack of events since that time. Also, I want to tell you a little bit about future bookings, and I want to tell you what this show is going to be about, because this is my first solo podcast. I'm not used to talking to no one and having no interaction, and certainly no offense, dear audience, but this is not a live show. There's no chat. So I am just talking to a machine right now. So in the near future, I have booked some guests. We're going to have a practicing yogi on 1 week, which is going to be really cool. We're going to talk about some Eastern philosophies, mostly Indian. We're going to talk about Shiva. We're going to find out what Anunnaki means in Indian traditions. We also are going to do an episode on alternate currencies to the US dollar. Because in a time of doom, people might be interested in that. Now, disclaimer, this is not a financial advice show. It's just for fun and informational purposes. But I've got one guy who's going to talk about some foreign currencies, but he's really going to talk mostly about precious metals, gold and such. And I have someone that's going to be talking about cryptocurrency, which sort of fascinates me because, it sort of started as organized bartering. There are funds where I guess they're taxable and it's accountable, but it seems like a place you can hide money, disguise money. Is it just money laundering? Is it just tax evasion? Is it just bartering with records? Or is it a real investment? Is it a real thing? So let's find out a little bit about that. But, for our purposes, when doom occurs, is it a good alternative for you to have a nest egg or something to live upon? All right. This show is going to be mostly news from the Garden of Doom, our wide variety of items. And when I first started looking into the research and the news sites and the news stories that I wanted to talk about over the last few weeks, I was afraid I wasn't going to have enough material for the show. Now I'm afraid I'm never going to end. So I want you to go to the Garden of Doom Facebook page, because every story I talk about has an article link or a video link or some further information on that Facebook page. This is going to be more like a quick hits on it. I don't think I'm going to do a deep dive into many or any of them. But there are a ton of them, and there were so many I didn't get to. I just didn't see where they could reasonably fit in the show. And something that I thought was going to be a quick hit will probably be its own episode down the road. Teaser, the Lost Continent of Lemuria, which is sort of like the new hot mythology thing, but it does seem to be based in some fact. But like everything else, it's sort of like the new Atlantis. But that's a tease. Maybe we'll get to it at the end of the show, maybe not. So, way back in week 1, I recommended a book called The Descent. And I still recommend The Descent. It's my favorite book of all time. It's by an author named Jeff Long. There was a movie called The Descent. I think it's loosely based on the book, but very loosely. I'm not really trying to plug the book, although I guess I just did several times, because I'll tell you a little story. When I was a married man, for a special birthday, my then wife, of course, reached out to Jeff Long and asked him to give me an autographed copy, an autographed photo, or something for my birthday, and he never even responded. So, a little bit of a jerk there. And I've had many people read this book and buy this book, and one of them said, it was okay, but overwhelmingly, everyone else loved it and thought it was a great book and bought others more of his books. So anyway, it's not important, but the reason why I want to talk about it is because one of the main points is that hell is a real physical place, but it's not just a place, it's all throughout the Earth's crust and mantle underground, and it's populated. And there's underground seas and oceans and rivers and mountainscapes and ruins and things like that, which brings us to several actual stories, because all of them told me, whoa, maybe the descent was real. Or if you prefer Jules Verne, Journey to the Center of the Earth, that there are some stories that resemble some of his stuff as well. So, all right. Story number 1. An ancient fragment of the Pacific Ocean was now found buried 400 miles below China. What does that mean? So, literally, a tectonic plate was dragged due to subtectonic level motions, magma, whatever the case may be, was actually dragged almost like a garage door that opens downward that you would see like in Batman or something, was dragged down basically from under Japan all the way down to below China, 400 miles. I guess the way they know this is because they test the soil samples or the seabed samples, and there's a huge swath of land or seabed that doesn't match the adjacent swath of land somewhere near Japan, extending for miles and miles and miles and miles. And somehow they found it 400 miles under China through some type of radar technology. But that's just amazing that basically a hole opened up in the earth and filled up with, further underground water or trenches or whatever the case may be. And who knows why or how that happened. I don't, but the article talks about it. So I don't know enough about it to make more sense of it, but it just struck me as really cool. Story number 2, there is a dark river. It's actually called Dark River because it never sees the sun. It flows approximately 600 kilometers, and it's below Greenland. So an underground river. Well, an underground river played a large role in The Descent and or its sequel called Deeper. By the way, if you love The Descent, I think you probably have to read Deeper, but I would probably tell you not to. I mean, the good stuff is just sort of rehashing the good stuff from The Descent, but to me, it didn't live up, and it didn't pick up on the threads that I really wanted it to pick up on. One day, somebody can hit me up and we can have like a Descent study group or something. So Dark River under Greenland. That is not the end of our Greenland stories, though. We'll get back to that soon. Story number 3. Massive mountains and smooth plains have been discovered 660 kilometers below the surface in the Earth's mantle. So the smooth plains are because of molten flows, or at least that's what they believe. But these mountainous mountain ranges underground have been compared to the Rocky Mountains and the Appalachian Mountains. So we're not talking about a few mountains here. We're not talking about hills. We're talking about real mountain ranges underground. So this is basically what I would like to call a hellscape. Though that's probably not fair. It's probably just a landscape just in eternal darkness. Story number 4. An underground lake was found in Greenland that's millions of years old. I don't have the dimensions of it, but this is the second largest underground lake discovered. The largest underground lake is under, well, you guessed it, probably Antarctica, which comes up later as well. Antarctica, the stuff of legends, especially when you start thinking about continental drifts and polarity switching and all sorts of fun stuff like that. So, to a related story, sort of Descent related, but going back to Jeff's favorite topic, the Nephilim, if you will, the Anunnaki, if you will, the Greys, if you will, the Watchers, if you will, the Ancient Aliens, if you will, Gods and Angels, if you will, the Giants, or anything else that you want to put it. The heroes from Greece, maybe the Denisovans, whatever it is, but a underwater megalithic structure was found at the bottom of the Sea of Galilee. So we all know the Sea of Galilee is in the Holy Land. It's in Israel. That's the heart of the religions and the heart of a lot of mythologies. So this is called the Wheel of the Giants. Yeah, obviously that got my attention. So the Wheel of the Giants are basically synonymous with the Nephilim, although there are some people who say that the Giants are the offspring of the Nephilim and the daughters of Adam. In either case, it still works. Half of Nephilim is still a Nephilim to me. But this is 12,000 years old at least. And it's at the bottom of the sea, and no one is sure what that structure is for. But it's a wheel, which implies that maybe somebody was turning it for some purpose, maybe opening a portal to the underground, the underworld. Maybe when they turned that's when that mantle, the underground garage door in the Pacific, opened up. Who knows? That's probably not it. That's like a worldwide Bond villain type of lair. Maybe Galactus is down there or something. All right. So we're going to move into some other types of stories, into Technology Terror Part 1. And this is all fact-based. This is almost all of these stories were printed in the last couple months of 2020. Some of the stories are reprints, some are a little bit older than that, but almost everything here, 90% plus, is news stories from 2020. So it's been revealed that the military, meaning the U.S. military, buys location data from the same ordinary apps that you and I have on our phones and computers, which is a little bit scary that they need location data from private industry. I don't know if it's comforting either, but it sort of confirms what I have realized. The two dystopian classics are Aldous Huxley's Brave New World and George Orwell's 1984. Not to be overly simplistic and not to assume that you don't know what these two books are, but Huxley's book basically was that the private sector took over and made us all sort of slaves to the private sector, sort of like a leftist nightmare. And Orwell was that the government took over everything and put us in a totalitarian nightmare, but from complete government control, sort of like a rightist nightmare. They're not really all that different. As it seems, they were both right. We have the capacity for both. The Huxley version seems to be a little bit faster and seems to have less guardrails against it, but that's just my opinion. So, moving on to the next story is that flying cars are coming. And by the way, I came up with this idea a few years ago after being inspired by a show that I watched. Because not many people are going to be able to afford flying cars, but they probably dig doing ride shares with it. And, people of, more moderate means, but middle class might do ride sharing just to, sort of get a kick of that. So, I was thinking about, Lyft and Uber are the companies. So we have Skylift and Uber Flies or Scuba for Sky Uber. It's not Suber, rather. Anyway, so flying cars are coming. There's a bunch of companies working on it. Tesla is one of those. So we're going to see flying cars pretty soon, and it shouldn't really surprise anyone because there's already drones, which, they're personless, but they don't have to be. They'll, it's just about the weight capacity and providing the energy. All right, next story, dealing with another future topics, which will probably be an entire show, the moon. NASA is opening up bids or proposals for companies to build nuclear reactors on the moon. Now, the suspicious part of me wonders if this is why they've made it public that there's water under the moon, because my understanding of nuclear reactors is that they need to have water to keep them cool. Then again, in space, on the moon, with the temperatures there, maybe they don't. Maybe it's naturally cold enough. Maybe the water is irrelevant. I don't know. Maybe one day we'll get a nuclear physicist on, or somebody can put that on the Facebook group, page, and answer that. But that is, to me, very interesting because obviously they also have spaceport designs, and they've been talking about using the dark side of the moon as a launching pad for missions to Mars, including man-made missions to Mars. And we've covered other moon-based stories along the way here on the Garden of Doom. Moving more into the macabre, but here on Earth. There, and of course, one recurring theme is going to be our friend Florida. But this isn't just Florida. Throughout the southeast United States, there have been a spread of dog-sized lizards. These are the Argentine tegus or tegus. Biologists are describing these as voracious omnivores. So picture that GIF where the guy is just having the buffet table, everything flowing into his mouth like a vacuum cleaner. That's what I picture as a voracious omnivore. But omnivores eat meat, they eat vegetables, they eat fruits, they eat everything. Maybe they eat garbage, who knows, like a goat or a pig. But it's the Argentine tegus, dog size, and it's throughout the southeast. It includes, of course, Florida, our friend, but they've been spotted as far west as Texas and as far north as South Carolina as of the date of the article. But hey, maybe they've made their way up to North Carolina since. I think they also made it to Tennessee. Definitely Alabama and Louisiana sightings as well. All right, back to space. There have been lots of reports in the past about this Goldilocks zone for life in the universe. And so at some point we were told there were a dozen planets, they were habitable. But now the definition of life has expanded so much, and our understanding has expanded so much, that it's now been fairly well established that in the Milky Way itself, just the Milky Way, not the universe, just the Milky Way, our galaxy, that there may be hundreds, if not thousands, of habitable planets. Now, this does not necessarily mean human habitation, just life. And I don't know at this point how life can't be assumed to be able to live anywhere, given some of the things that we've established this year. Also from NASA and also from space, a photo was released from the surface of Mars, and it's basically the Star Trek logo on there, which is, for those who don't know the Star Trek logo, I don't know who you possibly are, but it's sort of like the Acura symbol. And it really looks just like it, and it's really funny because it was used in the episode 1 of the new Star Trek show, Star Trek Discovery, which was on the CBS streaming network, but they're running them on regular CBS, I guess because of COVID, and there's no new series, no new shows being produced, or few shows being produced. So for some semi-original content that was there, so that just struck me as pretty funny, because I actually saw that episode twice, because the first episode was run for free, even though it was on the Access streaming network, which I never, subscribed to. So scientists are saying that this is just smooth erosion over a series of crescent dunes, though I didn't see any other crescent dunes in this photo, and I don't know how far away it was and how close these things normally are together, but it seemed like there was pretty significant swaths of land, north, south, east, and west of this, so that if it was like a dune bed, that we'd see more. But they're saying this is an example of Arolfan pareidolia, which we discussed a couple of weeks ago with the Inhumans, which is when we see something in an image and our brain tries to make sense of it, even though it's not that image at all. Sort of like you look at the moon, you see the man in the moon, or you look at a cloud and you see a turtle, but it's just a cloud. But take a look at that photo. It's uncanny. Let's give a little garden news now, a little less doom, though I'm not sure all of this was doom. Some of it is garden, maybe all of it, depending on your perspective. But it's been learned that birds are dealing with climate change much better than humans are. Even tropical birds that were previously thought to be much more susceptible to environmental changes than we were. I don't know if it's because they're cold-blooded, or they're just adaptable, or they're used to migrating, but birds are doing better than people are, so chalk one up for Mother Nature, or non-human Mother Nature. All right. I promised you a little bit more Antarctica. Let's get there. A Google Earth user spotted a dome-covered cave in Antarctica. So back to Antarctica, and this is a private person. This is technology being both a gift and a curse. They claim that the pictures or the images included an air vent and a metal shield. The thing is that nobody's disputing it, and it seems like it's even been confirmed that at least it's there. There's disputes whether there's an air vent and it's a metal shield, but nobody disputes that it appears to go deep underground, like very deep, and it appears to be 150 feet wide. Now that is the metal shield aspect, not what's underground. So of course, this brings up all of the conspiracy theories, and all of the fun thoughts, like it's an alien base. It was that Nazi Antarctic base. That's Atlantis, from days of old. Whatever the case may be. But I don't know if more stuff is going to come out about this, but I promise you I'll be watching. So back a little bit to Descent, but more in the world of Jules Verne, Journey to the Center of the Earth. Below, part of the Mexican desert, about 300 meters below, they found massive crystals. And when I say massive, they really are massive. They're as big as a 4-story building. And the funny thing is, it's in the state of Chihuahua, which, of course, I think of the little dog, so it's a little bit ironic, but that's the name of a state. The origins of these crystals are unknown. And bonus, there's unknown ancient organisms that are embedded within the crystals. So, come on, we can have lots of fun with that. We have Jurassic Park, where they had the DNA stuck in amber. You've got Encino Man. Does anyone remember the movie Gargoyles from the 70s? You know, the creatures hibernating and coming out. Or, you know, this is basically the same as the myth of Cthulhu, where the Titans were hibernating for thousands of years waiting for their time, or which was basically copied in Godzilla King of Monsters. Are these eggs like alien? You know, who knows? But whatever it is, it's really cool. And just to give you, other than a 4-story building, some of these crystals were measured to be 12 meters long, 4 meters in diameter, and 55 tons. So to give you some perspective, basically the size of a great blue whale. All right. Going to the other side, above ground, an entirely unknown civilization was discovered by archaeologists, and these were Australian archaeologists, and the reason I note that is because so many of the stories I came across were from Australian archaeologists and Australian anthropologists, which for a relatively small country, they seem to be producing a lot of those folks, or at least those folks are looking in all the right places. Anyway, this is in India. It's in the Himalayan mountains, and in the mountain peaks they found a civilization dating back to the Middle Ages. Again, previously unknown. They still don't know what it is, but the interesting part of it is that they found 200 horseman statues, which, you know, horses don't go up on mountains the size of the Himalayas. So that's pretty weird, and it's not like it was like from 10 million years ago that the mountains maybe were below ground, or 100 million years ago, or however long that takes. This is from the Middle Ages. So, yeah, the Middle Ages basically considered after the fall of sort of after Charlemagne until sort of the Enlightenment period, the Renaissance. So I don't know, let's just sort of say 900 to 1400-ish. They also found these horseman statues, which were very ornate, by the way, very detailed, and some of the designs were not consistent with that region. They looked maybe Mesoamerican or Persian or whatever the case is, but anyway, that's not the main point. Also, they were found near other structures which were believed to be religious complexes, temples, places of prayer, altars, or whatnot. So more to come on that, hopefully. There's a little story which is actually an unsolved mystery. It's actually from the 1940s. It's also in Australia, and I just wanted to relay it just because it actually reads like the beginning of like a Dan Brown novel, or some other thriller, but it seems to be true. So a dead body was found, and it was an immaculately dressed man in a jacket and tie and polished shoes and all that other stuff. And he had scraps of paper like deep in his pockets from something called the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that not exactly perfectly. And the phrase Taman Shud was also written on one of the pages. And that translates roughly to the end or finish. So a little bit like, Treasure Island, where you get the black spot and you know you're dead. So I don't know if this guy was fulfilling the prophecy or what, but pretty weird to find somebody in 1948 in the Australian desert, deep in a cave, by the way, in the outback, dressed to the nines, so they say, with these sort of cryptic messages in their pockets. So like I said, it sounds like the beginning of a Dan Brown novel or something like that. All right. Terror Tech Part 2. Technology has now found a way that they can beam sound directly into your head, and only your head. No one else would hear it. You don't have to have, virtual reality on, or headphones, or sound defeating headphones, or any of that kind of tech. It's just going to be beamed right into your head. That took me right to the movie Scanners, where people's head exploded from sound being weaponized. And I'm sure this will be weaponized too as well. It won't just be used for video games. So that's Tech Terror. To join in our Tech Terror parade, the United States Army is building a whole family of robot tanks for combat operations. These vehicles will be up to 30 tons. They're called RCVs, Robotic Combat Vehicles. So, of course, it sounds to me like Skynet is building their ground cavalry with heavy artillery. So that sounds awesome. And on top of awesome, scientists have also developed Laser Thor. Yes, laser devices that can actually direct lightning strikes. So we've got Laser Thor, Laser Zeus, pick your preference. Laser Storm if you're an X-Men fan, or Electro if you're a Spider-Man fan. Or if you're a General Hospital fan, didn't Mikos Cassadine have that weather machine? He couldn't. I don't think he could strike lightning, but he could, or direct lightning strikes, but he could sure make a lightning storm happen someplace. So that's pretty awesome. The good news here is that these different technologies are in different countries, so there's no guarantee that any one place will have access to all of them. But I don't know. That's not always how the world works. So anyway, cool. Back to more fabulous 2020 news. In Egypt, they found a cache, and it's an ever-growing number of sealed sarcophagi and mummies. And of course, because it's 2020, they're unearthing them. And of course, because it's 2020, they want to open them all and study them. Like, they can't just wait a few months. These things have not been touched. They've been barely aged. They've been preserved for over 2,000 years at least. Just wait a year. It's 2020. You want to know what makes this worse? Remember Poltergeist? I keep doing movie references because, well, why not? But they're finding these in the burial site in Saqqara, which back in the day was a pilgrimage location. It's a holy site. So it's Holy Land too. So come on. What could go wrong? All right, back to space. Well, remember we talked about how there's radio signals that have been emanating, and we've received them, and they sort of come in a pattern. They come and they go. Well, let's do another movie call out to Scream. The call is coming from within the house. It's not exactly that extreme, but these radio signals are coming from within our galaxy. They're in the Milky Way. So it's not just somewhere in the universe. It's in the Milky Way. So the call is sort of coming from within the house. All right. Going on to our next topic. There have been doubts about Methuselah's age. For those who don't know who Methuselah is, or with specificity, Methuselah is supposed to be the man who lived longest ever, at least in Judeo-Christian theology. I think, I can't say for sure that Islam has adopted this as well, but Methuselah was 969 years old. He was also Noah's grandfather. So the math doesn't work when they tried to figure out when Noah was born and when the flood happened and all humans except for Noah and whoever was on the ark died. So the 969 didn't work. So someone said, hey, maybe they're talking about lunar cycles in terms of months, not years. But that didn't really work out either. So, it's who knows if someone's going to figure that out. I'm sure the backup will always be the Bible as a parable rather than literal. But of course, we all hear a lot of people of various religions saying you should take the Bible literally. So I don't know. I don't know how they work that out when the numbers just don't work out. Which brings us to hell. And not the hell on earth that we've been describing, or not even the hell on earth that we've been experiencing. But there's an actual hell planet that's been discovered. Now, I didn't look to see where it is. I imagine it's in the Milky Way, but you can go to our Facebook page and find this article and take a look at it. But on the hell planet, it rains rocks and there's oceans of lava. So, sounds awesome. More on life. A species of bacteria survived on the outside of the International Space Station for at least 1 year. So I'm going to blow this pronunciation probably as well, but it's Deinococcus radiodurans. And this is a bacteria that we have here on Earth, and it's often found in cans of meat and is basically harmless. And somehow it mutated and developed protections that it could survive extreme temperatures and the radiation and everything else. So that's pretty amazing. And, I don't know if in future space explorations or colonizations, you'll actually bring these bacteria on purpose to sort of act as insulation. I just made up that theory, by the way. If it happens, dear audience, I deserve a Nobel just for the idea. It also reminds me of Star Trek Discovery. I hope someone else listening watched it, but they found like this giant tardigrade that could live in space that found a way to navigate the ship through a special warp drive. But the tardigrade also sort of evolved and developed to survive the outside of space, no problem. All right, more on the International Space Station. They've been experimenting with mining rocks in space, and they found they can do it with 400% efficiency that we do it here on Earth. So, with all things space, there's usually a profit motive. Exploration is usually for profit. Often comes with exploitation as well, but this is not a sociological or history show per se, so we won't get into that. But I will note that they did identify an asteroid. No idea where this asteroid is, but they identified an asteroid that is so full of precious materials that it's actually worth more than the entire wealth of planet Earth by itself. So if you're trying to tell me that there's not an interest in finding more such asteroids and meteors and objects with precious metals in them, even if they're worth, 1/10,000th of the wealth of Earth, that's worth countries and companies investing in space exploration and space mining and logistics and getting the things and getting them back, tractor beams, whatever it takes. All right, back to space. So you've probably heard stories about an asteroid that is going to hit us, that just missed us, etc., etc. Well, there's one in particular. It's called the Apophos asteroid, which has a wonderful name. Apophos in Egyptian means god of chaos, so that's awesome. So it just missed us. It missed us by about 24,000 miles, which actually is really small astronomically, recently. So its next flybys are going to be 2029 and 2036. It is the same asteroid because of its orbit and its ellipse that they're saying is more likely to hit us in 2068. So it does its orbits. Obviously, it's an irregular orbit, or based on our movements, the time periods are not consistent, but they're measurable. The interesting thing is that it's speeding up. Why is that? Because people are really angry at the Earth and they want to kill us. That could be it. But the scientific cause is that the sun is heating up the space rock unevenly. So I don't know if that increases or decreases the chance of impact. I don't know if that increases or decreases the window of years as to when Apophos may hit us, but I know it was late for 2020. The odds right now, by the way, are 1 in 150,000, which is really small for impact by Vegas odds, but for astronomy, it's actually pretty good odds, which means bad. Garden news, literally. If you want to live longer, eat more chili peppers. The American Heart Association has verified that if you eat more chili peppers, you're likely to live longer. So if you like spicy food, more power to you. Keep doing it. More mysteries. An archaeologist found a 2-million-year-old skull of a human cousin in deep in South African caves. Now, this was also an Australian archaeologist. I initially thought that this was in Australia, which would have really rocked everyone's boats, but it's not. It's in South Africa. So Africa still the established cradle of civilization, which is probably a good thing for the world, but not for this show. If we could find other evidence of life or humans or human cousins that started earlier somewhere else, that would just be amazing because of all the myths. But this is the Paranthropus robustus. It is a large-headed human with large teeth and relatively small brains. It coexisted around the same time as Homo erectus, which had a large brain but small teeth. So this is, sort of proof of simultaneous evolutionary diversion, or divergence rather. And it looks like the large brain with the small teeth was more useful than the smaller brain with the large teeth. So if you look at this skull, and again, go on our Facebook page, you'll find the article. This non-gorilla does look sort of like a gorilla skull. But it is not. It is a cousin of humans. It's a hominin. And on to other hominins, the mysterious Denisovans, which were for years just suspected, and then bits and pieces of their bones had been found. And it was just a word that was floating around, but now it's pretty established. And now it's absolutely established. So Denisovan bones were found in a Tibetan cave. And these were also found by Australian archaeologists or anthropologists, or at least they were part of the team. And the reason why they're so interested in this is not just Australia being a great exporter of these types of scientists, apparently, but Aboriginal DNA is apparently 5% Denisovan. So this is interesting. But it's interesting to me and this show because the Denisovans are basically thought to be tall and longer than their other hominid cousins that were alive around the same time, including Homo sapiens, Neanderthals, and whatever else may come of the Hobbit people that were found, I think it was in the Philippines or Malaysia. But when you think about tall and lanky around this time, again, it brings you back to descriptions of the Greys, the Watchers, the Anunnaki, also the legends of the fire-headed or fire-haired peoples that were seen in South America and Easter Island, and in Maorian traditions or mythologies in New Zealand. Now oftentimes it's described as red-headed or orange-headed, but that could easily be a mistranslation from fire-headed. And the reason I say that is because when we talk about the sun, we think about an orange ball, but if you look at it, it's really more yellow, and that could be blonde, which could tie into the Allens and the Aryan myth and the myth of the white tribe in North America and the myth of the white tribe in South America. But either way, orange-haired, red-haired, blonde-haired, it still fits generally the description that fits within my little narrative of the Anunnaki. But if it is the Denisovans, they didn't necessarily come from anywhere else. They were just a different strain of humans. So for those of you who are ground-based, that's good news for you. For those of you who are more into the unknown and unexplained and want to be a little bit more imaginative, call out to you and humans. This opens the door for a lot of stuff. All right. Scientists announced that they found over 12,000 new species of microbes on Earth. That is an enormous amount in 1 year. And of course, the more microbes they find, it usually means that they found them living in more extreme environments, which of course expands the definition of possibility of life everywhere else. There's also several articles out there about a war between the Neanderthals and the Homo sapiens. Now, it wasn't always a fighting war. Sometimes it was a cold war, a struggle for resources and survival. But this was for about 100,000 years. And the end of this story is obviously the Homo sapiens won, but we're not really sure why, because Neanderthals, in common parlance, get a bad rap. People think that they were sort of short and ugly and stupid and knuckle draggers, but they weren't. They were basically the same height as Homo sapiens, actually had bigger brains, and used tools and had art and had culture. And there was interbreeding between humans, and some people think that the Neanderthals didn't die out in the war. They were just sort of bred out, or the Homo sapiens maybe had a better resistance to certain diseases, or whatever the case may be, or just used teamwork better. But whatever it is, it took 100,000 years to establish that dominance. So I guess war is not a short-term proposition. Is that the moral of this story? All right. Also on the Facebook page, please go there, because we have links to the Egyptian dynastic lineage, which goes back 36,000 years, which is of course pre-Diluvian, meaning pre-flood, maybe two flood ages, maybe more than one ice age in there. We also have a link to the Sumerian dynasties with their lineage, which goes back over 30,000 years as well. So, same sort of footnote there as well, which is awesome. I mean, it could be mythology, but if it's not mythology, if it's history, it's fun. It cannot be disproven at this point, or proven. But it's still amazing, even if it's fiction, that these cultures trace their dynastic lines back tens of thousands of years. All right, we're going to go to some fun news regarding animals warring on humans right now. An alligator was shot, which is not a story in and of itself, but it was in Minnesota, which is a story. That does not happen. In Virginia, people called animal control because there was a snake that they just couldn't deal with. They couldn't kill it. It turns out it's not a snake at all. It's a worm being called the immortal worm. It's an invasive species. It's a foot long. It's nearly impossible to kill. It's from Asia, so you can cue the Trump going, China, China. And it's called the hammerhead flatworm, so look that bad boy up. In Japan, there are wasps that hunt underwater, and they've been called Godzilla wasps. So if you're looking for Godzilla on your bingo card, maybe that's a cheat that counts. In Florida, everybody's seen the video that's gone viral about that 10-foot monster gator that's just traipsing around without a care in the world on golf courses in Florida. So a 10-foot gator, it was huge, and I think that the 10 feet did not include the tail. Not 100% on that, but it looked darn dinosaurish to me. Also in Florida, a woman was greeted when she found a 14-foot Burmese snake in Florida. That actually broke a record. Now, I don't know how hip you are to geography, but Florida, faces the Gulf of Mexico on one side and the Atlantic on the other side. So you're basically, part of North America, or you're facing Africa or, southern Europe. Burma is in Southeast Asia. So obviously these snakes were probably brought as pets by, exotic animal pet collectors or zoos or whatever, and escaped. And I pluralize that because somebody else in Florida, of course Florida, opened up their trunk hood to find a 10-foot Burmese python there as well. So that's pretty awesome. Also more stories of sharks being where sharks normally are and being more aggressive, and whales attacking more fishermen, and not just killer whales. By the way, killer whales aren't whales at all. They're actually porpoises. The orca is the largest member of the porpoise family, but we can call them killer whales if we like. Going back to the moon just briefly, there's been an expanding crack on the moon, and nobody knows why. More to come on that, and hopefully we're going to talk about that and more fun moon stuff coming up. I know I've promised that a few times. So now, that brings us to Lemuria. I'm not going to do a deep dive into it here because we're running out of time, and I'm not sure if I'm that interesting to you guys when I'm talking alone. Hopefully I am. But Lemuria, in a very 10,000-foot overarching context, is a lost continent. Now, by lost continent, I've seen it in two different contexts. One, probably you remember when you went to school and the continents were together and they broke apart, and we're still ever moving. I think they move 1 or 2 inches a year, so it takes thousands, if not millions, of years to get to the point where we are now. But a lot of the islands weren't there. A lot of the islands weren't islands; they were land masses. Anyway, Lemuria is either when Australia and Asia were connected to Africa, and Lemuria is basically from Australia to Madagascar. I don't know why they picked Lemuria. Maybe it's because there's lemurs are sort of famous from Madagascar, but who knows. The other context is just a lost continent, that there was land and it sunk, which, that's sort of like Atlantis as well, just on the other side of the world if you believe the Platonic version of Atlantis, which was outside of the Pillars of Hercules, which is Gibraltar, that area. Sort of the opening between the Mediterranean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean, between the Iberian Peninsula and northern Africa. By the way, the story of Atlantis, where its origins were from Plato, who got this from oral tradition from his ancestor Solon, and Solon was 600 years before Plato, so I mean plenty of room for the game telephone to take effect. But past that, Solon was supposedly reporting what he had been told by Egyptian scholars when he visited Egypt, sometime during his life, obviously. And those Egyptians were reporting on Atlantis from their oral history going back thousands of years. Again, footnote back to the 36,000 years of dynastic history. So who knows how long that game of telephone lasted, but a little aside there, which is interesting and related. But here's some of the stuff that's going on and why Lemuria is coming into popular fiction now, or not in the popular conscious now, or at least mine. They found a lot of ruins sort of in and among the islands in northeast Australia. I think we've covered some of that, around New Zealand, but also around the Polynesian islands, and it's sort of expanding, and because of the look of the ruins and the designs and the structures, it looks like it was related. It was one culture or related cultures, whatnot. I said whatnot. There's a story among the New Zealand Maori tribe that there was a Chinese colony called the Waitatha people, or it's been confirmed by a Chinese colony in New Zealand that were living next to the Maori. But whatever it is, that it's again these tall, red-headed people. Very similar descriptions, by the way, to the story about Easter Island that we covered a few weeks ago, about the Rapa Nui legend, with tall, red-headed people. And again, going back to the Denisovans and what we mentioned earlier. But this New Zealand Maorian story and or Chinese story involves these folks coming to what's now New Zealand after traveling through South America. So again, call back to that. So these myths don't seem to have one source. That's why I don't completely reject them, and that's why whenever we find things about the Denisovans or these other stories, it's always very interesting to me, and maybe you hear my octaves go up a little bit. Anyway, Lemuria is sort of the new, cool, alternate thing, and it's sort of the new Atlantis, but it's obviously on the entire other side of the world. And I know there's some, people who like to say, well, Atlantis was actually on the other side of South America. There's some stories about Atlan, from the Andean peoples off the coast of, I guess, Peru or Chile, or both, out there, and they're saying that's Atlantis. But I mean, no, that it's the wrong part of the world. It's way too far to be outside the Pillars of Hercules. And listen, if there's one lost continent or lost island or lost civilization, it's not limited to one. I've always thought Atlantis was an archetype more than a real thing. It was sort of like Eden, or the Garden of Doom, or Olympus, or whatever you want to, whatever you want to call, your sort of utopian myth, your utopian dream. I don't think that's a modern construct. I think that's something that always existed. But if there were lost cities or lost civilizations, due to volcanoes or underwater earthquakes or other issues, why would it be limited to one? Why would Atlantis be unique? Why couldn't there be one off the coast of what's now South America? Why couldn't there be societies that were now submerged and the people had to flee in the South Pacific? So, frankly, that makes more sense than there just being this one uniform Atlantis. But anyway, Lemuria is sort of like, is it the new Atlantis? Is it even real? There's actually a nice little story on the page there. You can watch. I think it's a YouTube video, but it's fun and it's interesting. So take a look at it. But it is sort of new, and a lot of these things are still being discovered. So I don't want to do a deep dive into Lemuria until there's stuff to do a deep dive of that has more science to it and less speculation. I love to speculate. Everybody knows that by now. But I also want to tie some science into it. So, all right, this wraps up as many of the stories that I think I want to go through on this episode. I hope this was interesting to the audience. Please give us some feedback. I do want to plug my other podcast, Hammerlock Hangover. That's a pro wrestling podcast. So if you love pro wrestling or you're interested in pro wrestling, check it out. We only have 5 episodes so far, but it's going pretty well. If you're not interested in pro wrestling, don't do it just to pacify me. But if you want to make me happy, you can like it, you can rate it, you can subscribe and download. Don't listen. That's what Matthew Berry used to say on the Fantasy Football podcast. So why not? Again, I want to plug Shaheen's work. So check out his regular site, but also especially check out this auction. Let's help him make this a success. You can also check me out on Unpopular Review. I'm typically on the Wednesday night review of NXT and AEW. And you can find Unpopular Review on Facebook Live or Facebook Stream. But YouTube is where I see it. And you can just subscribe and it'll just show up on your stuff. I'm also on Suplex City Chats. We are typically on Thursday nights around 10:30, and we review the week in wrestling. And we also do pay-per-view recaps often. Actually, today we're scheduled to do a Suplex City Chats. We actually haven't done a show in the last 2 Thursdays because of various illnesses and whatnot. Once again, thank you very much to La Sicaria Viviana de la Jungla. And once again, check out Viviana Feng Shui on Facebook. Also, if you are in the Mid-Atlantic region, which is where I am, people know I'm in Baltimore, there's also Viviana Beauty. This is somebody who used to work for all the television stations down in Ecuador and Colombia, among other things, and she was the makeup artist for TV. So if you want to get beauty services from somebody who has actual TV experience and get great prices and great value and help my household out, then check out Viviana Beauty. But if you're anywhere on earth, Viviana Feng Shui. All right. Thanks, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Talk to you later.
Streaming only on Peacock.
John Wayne Gacy is suspected of having killed as many as 32.
Straight from the killer's mouth.
They want you to believe that I alone committed these murders.
The new gripping 6-part documentary series that investigates the crimes that shocked the nation.
The thing everybody thought they knew wasn't the whole story.
John Wayne Gacy, Devil in Disguise. All episodes streaming now.
Devil in Disguise.
Only on Peacock. Streaming only on Peacock.
John Wayne Gacy is suspected of having killed as many as 32.
Straight from the killer's mouth.
They want you to believe that I alone committed these murders.
The new gripping 6-part documentary series that investigates the crimes that shocked the nation.
The thing everybody thought they knew wasn't the whole story.
John Wayne Gacy, Devil in Disguise. All episodes streaming now.
Devil in Disguise.
Only on Peacock.